you so much for joining us this morning for the 77 Forum of the Executives Club's first session with us this season. I'm delighted to welcome you all to this virtual webinar, A City for All, Grassroots Growth and Winning Opportunities. I'm Justin Berkowitz. I run forums and content at the Executives Club, and I am so excited to bring this dynamic panel together this morning. I want to thank our sponsors of the 77 Forum who have inaugurated us with aplomb, Eric Sedler from Kivit and Sarah Glavin from Amazon. Eric is going to introduce this morning's panelists, so I'm going to pass the virtual microphone over to him. Thank you all so much for joining us this morning, and over to you, Eric.
Good morning. My name is Eric Sedler, and I am the CEO of Kivit. It's my delight on behalf of myself and my co-chair, Sarah Glavin, Head of External Affairs at Amazon, to welcome you to today's panel discussion, A City for All, Grassroots Growth and Winning Opportunities. Today's virtual panel also marks the inaugural program for the Executive Club's 77 Forum, a space where we're focused on conversations that bring about growth, change, and opportunity to all residents in Chicago's 77 diversely rich neighborhoods. In that spirit, I'm excited to introduce today's panelists. Joining us today are LaForce Baker, Vice President of the Community Impact Team at World Business Chicago, Chris Brown, Director of Operations for Southwest Organizing Project, Aisha Jocko, Executive Director of Westside United, and Sharif Walker, President and CEO of Bethel New Life. Moderating today's program is Darlene Glanton. Darlene spent 30 years as a journalist at the Chicago Tribune and is now a senior advisor at Kivit. We invite you to submit your questions to our panelists using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. I know Darlene and our panelists have a lot that they're hoping to cover. So Darlene, I'm going to pass it over to you.
As you all know, when we talk about growth in Chicago, all neighborhoods are not equal. But there are hardworking, dedicated, and sometimes cash-strapped grassroots organizations within our underserved communities who are working hard every day to turn things around and make sure that we have a more economically equitable society, right with opportunities for everyone. We don't always hear about their successes, but they are changing things neighborhood by neighborhood. They can't do it alone though. To bring about the kind of transformational change needed in Chicago, they need support from the larger Chicago business community. Today, we're going to talk about the work some of these organizations are doing, what the larger business community can do to help, and what these community-based organizations can contribute to the larger business community. So let's start with Chris Brown. Chris is Director of Operations at Southwest Organizing Project, a multi-faith-based agency group that has been in service for more than 25 years. Chris, tell us a little bit about the organization.
Great, thanks, Darlene. It's great to be here. So the Southwest Organizing Project, or SWOP, is a community-based organization whose mission is to build power for the stakeholders of Southwest Chicago. We work on a wide variety of issues, including housing, immigration, education, economic development, and anti-violence, just to name a few. And we do it by building relationships and trust between people so they can act collectively together.
Great. So during the early COVID-19 pandemic, the communities you serve had some of the highest positivity rates in Chicago. And now you have the 12th highest vaccination rate in the city. That speaks volumes about the resilience of the people in those neighborhoods. Would you tell us about how COVID impacted jobs and the general well-being of the residents you work with and what you're doing to turn things around?
Sure. So the neighborhood was hit hard because it's a community where the people who live there are the folks who had to go to work. They couldn't be like many of us who could work remotely. So they were in there and at deep risk of getting COVID, or they were also the people who were laid off oftentimes from jobs that shut down. So to counteract that, we did a lot of work to get people connected to financial resources, grants from the government and private individuals who help them get through by paying their rent or utility bills. And then we mobilized a whole core of people, our COVID response core, who went out to talk to people first about testing, the need to get tested and isolate if they were positive. And then they talked to people about getting vaccinations. And the reason it worked is because folks built relationships. They talked to people. They sat one-to-one with folks and understood what their issues were, what they were concerned about, and then helped them move to action, to go get tested or go get a vaccination. And it worked because they worked through local member institutions like churches and mosques and schools to connect with people where they felt comfortable and then could get them to move to action on taking advantage of issues that would help them deal with COVID.
So this is a really good example of how having, boots on the ground, in touch with people all the time, can really be helpful when we're in a situation that needs immediate attention, right?
Absolutely. It's all about the relationships and people trusting each other, knowing each other, and being able to work together collectively to take action.
Sharif Walker is president and CEO of Bethel New Life, Inc., one of the oldest community-based advocacy groups in Chicago. Sharif, tell us a little bit about the work you do.
Thank you, Darlene. Right now on the West Side, we're providing programs and initiatives that help individuals and families to be healthy and well through all stages of life. So we offer everything from senior housing to early learning on our campus and everything in between. And while we're an older organization that at one time was doing all that work under one roof and through its own staff, we've learned a lot about sustainability in the last 3 years, particularly during COVID. And right now, our focus is on forming partnerships so that that work gets done by people that do it every day. And we don't assume the responsibility for the expertise that comes with all of those different areas.
So these partnerships are really important. And, this organization knows a lot about bringing neighborhoods back after a catastrophic event. Bethel New Life started in response to the devastation and disinvestment following the riots after Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated in 1968. And though you were not personally around, Sharif, can you talk a little bit about how major social justice movements, including like the murder of George Floyd, can spark positive change for a while, and what happens when these events are no longer in the news?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting when we have incidents like that. Just to speak to our founding, Mary Nelson, who founded our organization, and by the way, still lives on our campus and visits my office quite often, helps remind me of the energy that's needed during times like what we've experienced through George Floyd and others. Because you get this boost, right? You get people that are all of a sudden awakened to the struggles of their fellow man, and so and want to help. And so you got to be on the ball and ready for those opportunities to be able to take advantage of those waves that come. Because the need has always been there. It's like somebody lifted a veil and kind of revealed this need that we've known, those of us who've lived in the community for all of our lives have known has existed since day one, is now awakened to the world, and everybody wants to be helpful. And you got to take advantage of that while it lasts, because, even just 2 years after a pandemic and all of the things that we've seen, some of those things are starting to fall to the wayside already. And so we got to be ready to take advantage of those little shots in the arms that happen when we have incidents across our country.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about that is you can never predict these things, right? So that means you have to be ready at all times, which can be difficult, I would imagine.
Oh, really, really difficult for not-for-profits, right? That are out here already struggling to access funds that are highly scrutinized and very specific to the need. And so when you have to, as an organization, kind of shift on a dime, those funding sources aren't always prepared to shift with you. And so it's incumbent upon us to get that message across to those communities that the need has changed, and not only to be able to express it, but to be able to show it. And that's where the help of volunteers and people that have the passion for the work really helps to be able to establish some demonstrations of how we can do this work and raise the impact of it moving forward.
So Aisha Jacko is Executive Director of Westside United, which advocates to improve health outcomes and business development on the West Side. Aisha, can you tell us a little bit about Westside United?
Yes. Westside United is a collaborative started by 6 hospitals, incorporating community voice and other sectors to help address the 16-year life expectancy gap that spans from Chicago's Loop across 10 West Side communities, where the largest gap is in Garfield Park. And so our big, hairy, audacious goal is to decrease that life expectancy gap by 50% by 2030, looking at, yes, access to care, but also what economic vitality looks like for residents. So how do we hire more locally? How do we diversify our supply chain by working with local businesses to help local economies? How do we support small businesses? How do we invest? These are some of the questions that our partners have set out to answer that help us get at some of the economic disparity that we know and claim to be based in structural racism and historical disinvestment. We also look at education and internships, a cluster of care hub that we have in the North Lawndale community. And then we look at the neighborhood and physical environment, tracking things like food access, and again, social impact investing. So our road to 2030 is also being immersed with initiatives coming out of the Department of Public Health, Healthy Chicago 2025, and other initiatives that are aligned with what our mission is and what we aim to do by 2030.
So that's a broad spectrum of issues there. So how do health, education, and business development intersect? And how does that impact the overall growth of the community you serve? In other words, how essential are health, education, and business investment to implementing change?
Sure. So we know that if we put a healthcare center, a federally qualified health center, et cetera, on every corner of the West Side, that's not going to make a difference. Research has shown that we have to look at economic stability across the West Side to be coupled with, yes, access to care, but also thinking through, when we talk about the riots of 1968, the fact that corridors in West Garfield Park have been underdeveloped since that time. We see that since that's a community with the lowest life expectancy, that in order for us to be impactful, we have to think about residents and the poverty level, what the median income is, and how healthcare can help by helping to leverage the workforce and to hire locally and to get people in the doors employed and on a career trajectory that allows them to own where they live, et cetera. We know that our businesses need a boost, and that we need to think about in corridor redevelopment in Garfield Park and other places, that we need to position resources through our partnerships to help those businesses hire locally, sustain as well. So for us, when we think about the life expectancy gap, our levers are the social drivers. And because our hospitals are anchor mission leaders, seeing that if combined, they'd be the #1 employer in the state, their ability to spend ranges of around $4 billion. So it's really around looking at impact and how we turn that to the backyards of the health systems, which happen to be the West Side. And we pull the levers that we can control in terms of hiring, supply chain diversity, social impact investing, the fact that these institutions prior to Westside United were siloed. They're now working together and setting targets around annual hires, annual internships, which is also a part of this career pipeline. So for us, it's an all hands on deck approach, looking at healthcare, but bringing partners to the table like Amazon, like JP Morgan Chase, and others that can help us bolster this engine that we know we need to be cognizant of when we think about life expectancy and what the West Side needs to help address the gap.
So continuing on this discussion about partnerships, let's go to LaForce Baker, who is Vice President of Community Impact Team for World Business Chicago. LaForce, tell us a little bit about World Business Chicago.
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much. And thanks everyone for having us. You know, at World Business Chicago, what for most folks know, but just in case you don't, we're essentially the economic development arm for the city of Chicago. So, you know, the community impact team within World Business Chicago focuses on that economic development on the south and west sides of the city. Our most well-known initiative is the Invest Southwest initiative, really targeting that economic development within 10 targeted communities on the south and west side, some on the west side, some on the south side. The economic corridors, or essentially the front doors to the community. You know, the whole goal with having this very targeted approach is that if you could have, you know, a walkable 3, 4, 5, 6 block area in a community that changes, and you can now get all the amenities that all of us want in our neighborhoods, from a grocery store to a restaurant to, you know, healthcare, you know, all of the basic amenities that we kind of use every day. That's when you see change in the community. That's when you see safety go up in communities, you know, and people feel like this is a place where they can grow and thrive. And so, you know, for us, you know, we focus on that. We focus on just general business development on the south and west side. So, you know, I'm working on several grocery store projects across the south and west side. We just supported a project in Inglewood that just launched yesterday from the community, which I'm really excited about. And, you know, outside of that, we also are attacking the access to capital issue. We're launching our inaugural Black and Latino Excellence Investment Summit this summer, where essentially we're getting the biggest banks, so the JP Morgans of the world, Chase, Bank of America, getting those banks in the room with philanthropy and angel investors to actually make sure that lending happens to Black and Latino businesses in our neighborhoods, so they can be a part of actually revitalizing the neighborhoods instead of it being determined by someone outside of the neighborhood. You know, one of our big things that we're focused on this year, and I think, you know, you can always kind of call on us to do, our neighborhood strategy is really, you know, we want to do like less charity from the corporate community and more empowerment. I think that that's the key, empowering, you know, whether it be nonprofit organizations, whether it be businesses in the community, to actually change their own communities instead of, you know, someone coming up with a great idea in a boardroom downtown Chicago, and then it falls flat when it gets to the community because people from the community didn't develop it. And so, you know, we're really all about trying to empower folks in the community to, you know, bring the amenities that people from the community want and need, and, you know, hopefully that helps drive safety, that helps drive jobs, that you know, makes the community feel like home again.
So that's very interesting. So what is the vision that World Business Chicago has for the corporate landscape of Chicago outside the loop? And what will it take to bring that vision to fruition?
That's a great question. I think when we think about the vision of what the communities could look like outside of downtown, I think number one, they should be self-sustaining communities. You know, the thing about the downtown area is that, you know, downtown has a lot of different amenities. It kind of has like an ecosystem that makes it very attractive for large corporations to put headquarter offices there, or, you know, kind of co-locate with other large businesses. I think we could do the same thing in the neighborhoods. When we look at the south and west sides, you know, neighborhoods have these amazing natural assets, whether it be the people that's there, whether it be just natural assets that's there, like whether it be the lake or landmarks or all this history, in some of our neighborhoods on the south and west sides. I think we really need to think about how do we create these little ecosystems so that, if folks want to, they can go downtown, but they can also get a lot of the amenities, whether it be a grocery store, a quality job, a sit down restaurant when they want to celebrate someone's birthday or something like that. They should be able to get a lot of those things in their community. I think a lot of times, we focus so much on the downtown area that, that gets a ton of the development. And then, we don't develop these amenities in the neighborhoods. And so, the neighborhoods are then just completely reliant on downtown. So I think that, if we can create, these ecosystems in the communities, I think it makes the city overall more sustainable because you have a strong downtown and then you have strong neighborhoods. There's one example where I think, really captures this well. We supported Discover Financial. So, a member of the corporate community, we supported them in terms of building out a call center in Chatham, bringing 1,000 jobs to Chatham. That is transformative in many ways, but the biggest way is this is bringing quality jobs, for someone they can start out making, about $44,000 a year. That's a real road to the middle class. That person can then buy a home in the neighborhood. That person can then, shop at a grocery store, support the local businesses in the community. And then, the folks in the community that build small businesses, they now have a customer base that can support them. And so now essentially you had a member of the corporate community make an investment in the neighborhood, bringing some jobs there. And then that creates that ecosystem in the neighborhood. Some of those folks can now also go downtown as well. So they're still supporting the central business district. But I think that that's what we need to do. I think that's a really good model in terms of empowering people in the neighborhood. There was an opportunity there. The talent was already there. And we brought a member of the corporate community there to build out a part of their operation. And it was a win-win. It was really successful for Discover. It was really successful for Chatham. So again, that's going to less charity, more empowerment. It's not, that was a win-win. That was a great business decision for Discover. And now it's great for the city.
So Chris.
Hey, Darlene.
Hi, okay. So your organization is all about empowerment, right? So, what LaForce said is really interesting because one of the barriers, and probably one of the biggest barriers to people wanting to invest in neighborhoods on the south and west side is this fear that they have about violence and other things that, problems that we face in these communities. So do you feel as though organizations such as yours are utilized enough when city leaders are trying to figure out how to solve some of these social issues in our communities? And what tools do you bring to the table that would help them figure out what to do about things like crime, unemployment, education, and thus spark economic growth within these underserved communities?
That's a lot, Darlene. So I think a couple of responses. One is I want to build off something Sharif said, which is the need for flexible funding for organizations to be able to flexibly respond to issues in communities. And too often funding is very narrowly focused. And so we need funders to trust what community organizations are doing in communities. Bethel New Life has been around for 40 years at this point. They have a good sense of what's happening. SWAP's been around for 25 years. We have a good sense of what's happening. So we need funders to trust what neighborhood groups are doing and know that we are deeply rooted in the neighborhood. We've done several quality of life plans, for instance, that brought together literally hundreds of people that represented, more than 50 institutions in the neighborhood to thoroughly plan out how we would transform our community. We need people to invest in those initiatives. To what LaForce said, we need to empower the community. So we need to have people really engaged in those conversations where they understand what's happening in the neighborhood, build trust between folks, and then allow people the space to act collectively to address these issues and to follow up on community plans. Really trust what people are saying because they've thought it through really carefully and they know what they're doing. To LaForce's point again, not having, sort of downtown driven decision making, but really community-based decision making. As a quick example, we did a reclaiming campaign to look at addressing the foreclosure issue in our community. Community thought out, well-developed plan, addressed issues around housing, safety, education, because we know it takes a whole bunch of those issues to really make a community whole. We took a neighborhood that had lots and lots of vacant buildings, almost 800 of them. We took a target area that started with 93. We now have it down to 8 because we invested strategically in a lot of vacant buildings. We've seen crime go down 73% in that space, including a 50% reduction in violent crime. And we've seen schools improve to level 2 or level 1 from being level 3 schools. So we know that when you invest in communities, it can actually make a huge difference in the issues that I think everybody in Chicago cares about.
How do you get the general business community, though, and the people who could really make a difference to understand that there are things that are going on in these neighborhoods that deserve the kind of support that you're looking for?
I think our biggest strategy is we invite people out for conversations. Come out and talk to us. Come out and take a look at the work. Go out to the west side and see what's happening on the west side. Come out to the southwest side and see what's happening in southwest Chicago. Go to Bronzeville and see all the amazing stuff that's happening in Bronzeville these days. Engage people in conversations. Talk to them about what's happening there. I would encourage everybody who's a part of this webinar today to find somebody in a neighborhood and go out and talk to them. Tell them, about their story, about what they're interested in, and find out their story about what motivated them to do the work that they're doing. Engage in that relationship building, start building some trust, and then figure out ways you can support local work that's happening in communities.
So Aisha, while we have the attention of the Chicago business community today, can you talk a bit about the small businesses and startups Westside United is providing funding for? And have you noticed any particular trends among these emerging businesses? And if so, how can leaders with the larger footprint in Chicago help these businesses succeed?
Sure. So our small business grant pool launched in 2018 with initially $85,000 that spanned across 7 businesses, with 3 of them being nonprofits with social enterprise components. And so for us, it was, again, thinking about how hospitals could be impactful to businesses in our backyards. And so the range of businesses that were funded got funding to do a marketing plan or funding to do some licensing for street vendors. And so for us, that work has grown where now we commit to award $500,000 annually to businesses across the West Side. And to date, we've awarded close to $1.4 million in small business grants to 115 West Side businesses. And so for us, they're at different levels, as mentioned, they're startups, they're existing businesses. And what we want to do in terms of building out continuity is to get those businesses infused in the supply chain of our health systems, because that annual spend, again, ranges around $4 billion. And so the connection is that once we get you a grant, depending on where you are in the life cycle of your business, the end game is to get you fused in. So now we are pairing spend categories across our health systems with grant categories so that we get the right businesses in. But for the business community, it would be great for businesses to step in and use those businesses also to diversify their supply chain, to fund the grant pool. We're finding that some of our sponsors, as mentioned, this shift from, just giving charity, they want to think about how they can go deeper and use their thought partnership and brain trust to really build out and invest over time. So a sponsor like Molson Coors has also offered up licensing for the lonely entrepreneur to all of our businesses. This year we have 46. So in addition to getting a grant, they now have access to this module or these modules that take them from A to Z and how to build out their business, depending on where they are. So we want to see more of that. To LaForce's point about bringing in anchors that can help with hiring, that can tag on and have greater impact for our business communities, we would love to see that. One, through supporting the grant pool so that we're able to impact and have more businesses that can apply and get funding, but then also to think about what other resources that are in your toolkits that will allow our businesses to sustain themselves grow and have a trajectory where our corridors on the west side look like the corridors in Wicker Park and so on and so forth. And that's going to take an all hands on deck approach where we're working together to make sure those businesses are sustained.
Okay. Sharif, tell us a little bit about your nonprofit incubator space. What were your goals for this space and how is it working out? And is there anything you're particularly proud of regarding this space?
Yeah, I got here just under 2 years ago, and that nonprofit incubator space was part of the sustainability model for our campus. So, you know, we were founded in West Garfield Park, but we are currently occupy a campus in Austin, which, by the way, a lot of people are not familiar with our campus. And so, you know, tying in a little bit of what Chris was speaking to on how we get people involved, you know, I get my steps in every week out here. I'm doing tours of a 9-acre campus that has historical value on the west side. It used to be St. Anne's Hospital. And so it was purchased by Bethel in the 80s, and they actually took some time to renovate it and moved in the 90s. So you can imagine how much space 9 acres is, or maybe you can't, but it's a huge hospital building. And there are many other facilities that are on the campus. But unfortunately, because of disinvestment in this campus over time, we have many of those properties that are either not being utilized or are condemned at this point because the upkeep for them was so expensive for a not-for-profit that they focused on the spaces that were being used. And so the hospital space, which it is renovated and has a number of spaces that can be utilized, because above our first floor where I sit now is our senior housing. And we have about 180 units on the campus of senior housing. But on the first floor, we have a multitude of office spaces and community spaces that we obviously, especially now, at one time, Bethel had over 350 employees. Right now, Bethel proper has about 7 full-time employees and about 5 part-time employees that are working the partnerships for this campus. And so that incubator started as a space where not-for-profits from the community that didn't have large budgets to acquire their own space could utilize space on our campus to fulfill their mission and vision in the community. And what we've transitioned that to is not far from there, but being very intentional about the partners that we bring into the campus spaces and assuring that their mission and visions align with our mission and vision to provide health and wellness. And as we know, those health and wellness areas, they probably haven't expanded, but being more specific about what equals health and wellness under the social determinants of health that have come out of recent conversations over the last 3 to 5 years, that those conversations we have with people that come to our campus now are about how their organization can fulfill one of those areas in any of those. If you've seen these wellness wheels out there, there are several of them, from anywhere from 6 subjects in wellness to 10 subjects in a Black culture wellness wheel that I've seen recently. But using one of those wheels to have discussions with potential campus partners on what areas under this wellness wheel are you embedding your work in, and how can we partner with you to raise the impact of that work from our campus. So it's transitioned a little bit from just kind of being a space where people could utilize space at a reasonable rate to still having reasonable rates for people, but also joining our mission vision for health and wellness in providing and raising the impact of that work.
Okay. LaForce, let's go to you a bit here. So what is World Business Chicago looking for in potential partners? Do you see any untapped opportunities for sharing resources between your organization and community organizations that are working to bring about economic development?
That's a great question. So I think when I think about the core kind of tenet of what we're looking for in a partner. Number one, we're looking for people that's already doing the work. Like I said, we really want to empower them to be able to bring about the change that they want to see in the community, because they're the boots on the ground. They've been doing this for years, whether it be Aisha, or other, folks that are in the community that have been doing this work for a long time. We want to just piggyback by saying, hey, we have, a board with some of the top companies in the country, and hey, how can these companies help? I think that's really what is really helpful for us. So like if a community organization has already identified that I need, let's say, a grocery store, or we really need a healthcare facility, whatever that is, we can then work with our corporate partners to say, okay, healthcare facility on our board, here's an expansion opportunity for you. Again, this is not, charity, this is empowering, folks in the community to, bring the type of amenities that they want to see. And so, we can create those win-wins when, the community organization has identified what is the strongest need for the community. And then we can help them to meet that need, because they might not be able to attract that corporate partner on their own. We can also, something that we found really helpful, we've done these pitch books for different communities to really just better advertise the great attributes that are in these communities to the corporate community, because sometimes folks in the corporate community don't always see, what are the gems in the community. So, we've been doing that. I think if there are local community partners that, have some assets in their community that they want to be highlighted, reach out to us. Like on our social media, we try to, put out stories about all of the great work going on in the community, really highlight some of these neighborhoods so that investment can, start to more naturally come there. But, in the meantime, we are that kind of concierge for the corporate community to kind of show them the playbook. Hey, this is what has happened in some other communities. It's worked really well. You might be able to do the same in some of these other identified communities. And then for the, folks in the community, we try to say, okay, if this is what your need is, we can help you kind of package that up to the corporate community so that we can get the investment in the community sooner rather than later.
Excellent. So we're going to go now to some questions from the audience. They have some really good ones here. And you guys anybody can answer this if you feel as though it applies to you. Number one, the first question is, how can we provide a more consistent shot in the arm rather than wait for negative events in the community to spur action? Would anybody like to tackle that, LaForce? Okay.
Yeah, I'll jump in here. Yeah, I mean, I think number one, and I'll use Discover as the example because they're just a really good example to me. They have this big initiative on diversity and inclusion at Discover, but it moved beyond just an initiative about diversity and inclusion. They really looked at, okay, like fundamentally for our business, we need to be where society is moving, where our employees are. They looked out and they saw that one of their average call center reps is traveling an hour to go to, one of their centers in the suburbs to take calls from everyone on this call when they have something wrong with their credit card. They said, what if we located a call center where the people that actually work here live? And in doing so, that was, a part of the, kind of the impetus to create a call center in Chatham. It's moving from that, less charity, more empowerment, where you're saying, hey, for our business, it makes sense for us to have, a call center in a predominantly Black neighborhood. Like it makes business sense for that to happen. I think when organizations start to think that way, and we collectively start to think that way, you see more change happen, on an institutional level, instead of these kind of more like knee-jerk reactions to, catastrophic events like what happened with George Floyd. So I think every organization should just be thinking about how can I make sure that my business is more inclusive, but then also like just thinking about, hey, how can I expand my business into new markets? And we're more than happy, like I said, to help businesses to do that, because we've done that successfully with others. But yeah, I think that's the key thing, just being very intentional about expanding your business in an inclusive way.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I might add just that I mentioned earlier the quality of life plan that we've done on the Southwest side. I think the other two organizations, on the West Side United and Bethel have also participated in quality of life plans. That's a great way for organizations to support groups that are really doing community-based planning, so that it gets beyond the reaction to a particular event, but really engages people in strategic thinking for 5, 7, 10 years. So there's a real community-driven plan that drives the development in a neighborhood. It's also a way to get to one of the points that Aisha made earlier, which is that all of this work is connected, and we need to see it as being connected. It's not an isolated incident that happens once, but education is tied to housing, it's tied to healthcare, it's tied to anti-violence stuff. And so we need to also be thinking holistically about the approaches we take to the work. So by doing some community-based planning, we can think that way and act strategically rather than just sort of being reactionary as things come up.
I agree.
And here's, I'm sorry, go ahead, Aisha.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. The quality of life plan is the Bible into that community's universe and their DNA. And it's so important to start there. And I'd also like to offer up one of the things that's critical to our model is infusion of community voice at every level. So at our Executive Leadership Council, you have 6 hospital leaders sitting across 6 community leaders, and they're making the day-to-day decisions around some of the strategies that we have. So think about inclusion of community, as mentioned, prior to something happening, being proactive, and really understanding that they are experts in their own right. Some of our most powerful work during COVID-19 was co-convening a racial equity rapid response team at the request of the mayor. And one of the critical successes of that was infusion of community voice, because they are true first responders, and they brought so much wealth there. And what we heard was that for the first time in decades, they were invited to a table where they were able to influence policy at some level, but also the day-to-day decisions that impacted their community. So I would definitely say wherever you can, make sure you are convening and reaching out and having a temperature check around community and having folks engage with your work.
Okay, go ahead.
If I could quickly co-sign onto the quality of life plan and feedback from the community. I mean, both of those go hand in hand. Having been closely tied with Austin Coming Together in the Austin community, where Darnell Shields is leading the organization around the quality of life plan, starting here at Bethel, having been a part of that plan, was instrumental in us creating a vision for Bethel New Life moving forward that is embedded in things that are in that plan that lead to health and wellness for the community. And I think it's essential that community-based organizations are tying to that plan and making sure that they're finding areas in there that they can develop around and add value to the community through that plan, because the impact for what we can do through community raises when we're all in alignment with the goals for the community and are moving forward in that vein.
Okay, so here's an excellent question from a member of the audience. How can I plug in and get involved? What are some good first steps to involve myself in this important work? Who'd like to tackle that first? Sheree.
I'll jump in there. I think a lot of times, and it's interesting, I'm having conversations with some community entities that are coming from suburban areas and want to get involved in the work in the city. And that's a question they often ask. Because I think a lot of times the assumption is that if people make donations, that's what organizations need all the time. And don't get me wrong, we're still accepting envelopes, but besides for envelopes, the strategy that organizations like Bethel needs to move things forward, to raise the impact, is very important. And so there are a lot of areas where, I have expertise in some areas, and we have board members with expertise in other areas, but there are still, day to day, there are areas that organizations need support in. We're in the midst of a capital development plan, and, the things that come day to day, needing a general contractor, but needing a minority or Black general contractor, especially during these times when equity funding is providing opportunity for Black general contractors all over the city. It's hard to engage with or get engaged with a general contractor that can help us develop out our plan even further. They're just overwhelmed and busy with all of the things that have come with that. So that's just an example of where people can add value. There's expertise out there that can be tied in. So if you have time to join a board of directors, or to be an advisor to the board, or to a CEO in a certain area, being able to offer that opportunity it goes a long way in helping organizations sustain and fulfill their mission and vision.
Darlene, I would just add real quick that I think there are some key organizations that work around the city and have good connections to folks. World Business Chicago is one of those. They work across a lot of neighborhoods. Sarah put a link in the notes for List Chicago, which does a lot of work supporting groups all over the city. And Chicago Cares is a good organization that helps connect people to volunteer opportunities. So those are all three places from that people can go to get involved in community organizations.
And I would say on your road to engagement, to be curious, to take time with that quality of life plan and do your homework prior to, and to also think about in your engagement with some of the anchors and trusted intermediaries, ways in which you can build trust, because no one wants another spectator in the room. Not that you would be that, but you want to make sure you have knowledge of who's at the table, what some of the concerns and points are that community is passionate about, and that you are positioning yourself to be invested and not just to drop in a few times here and there, but to really be committed to whatever table you find yourself at.
That's a great point, Aisha. And I think, one of the things that I have been saying a little bit more fervently in meetings lately is like really approaching kind of like this community redevelopment work, or like, trying to be a part of the solution with a humble tone of just going in and saying like, hey, I'm not the expert here. I want to help. What are the best ways that I can help? And then being open to, what folks in the community or the intermediaries are saying. I mean, like we found that that is the most sustainable way to create like real change in the community. And I think also, I think you should just be honest. Is your organization more so going to just, write the check, that can go to Sharif, give him the envelope? Or is your organization going to make the larger investment? Like, hey, I'm going to try to build out something in this community, or, hey, I want to support a larger development. We can help you with that, by the way, as World Business Chicago, if you're trying to make those decisions. But I think figuring out what is the level of investment that you or your organization wants to make, I think that makes it easier too, because then you can come to the conversations, pretty honest, like, hey, this is what we have the capacity to do at this time. And then from there, maybe you ratchet up your level of support as people in your organization get more invested, learn about the community that you're supporting.
Okay. We have about 4 minutes left, and I just want to add one final question. And that is, when we often talk about nonprofits, we're talking about, how you can help the nonprofits. But let's reverse that and have you guys talk about what you bring to the table for these larger business organizations. How do you help them? And how do you help the city as a whole?
I think one place to start is that the employees that work for the companies that are on this call, they live in the neighborhoods that we work in. A lot of the folks who work in the city of Chicago live in communities like the ones we're all talking about here. So if you want a strong workforce, you need to be investing in strong neighborhoods so that they can come to work every day and be their most productive selves and help take your business further. So when we help build strong neighborhoods, we're helping you build a strong business.
I think in terms of help, like LaForce in this relay race of helping community has passed me the baton in an example of a grocer that wanted to come into the West Side. And so he tapped West Side United to say, hey, I know you are working on the ground, you have connections between these two communities. Can you help them bring in or sit at the table to learn more about the landscape? And that's what we did. So from LaForce, we were able to bring in someone that did a recent acquisition of stores in markets like Chicago and put them in front of institutions like Sharif, the alderman, et cetera. So what we can provide is that inside look to the different systems across community, as well as in your journey to be more equitable, in your journey to course correct whatever the legacy of your business has played in this pool of historic disinvestment or racism. We have a model that can help course correct some of that through our practices of diversifying supply chain, being more intentional about hiring and building community wellness and wealth. So we offer that as an entity that is looking to be more fused and connected with larger anchors, i.e. corporations.
Yeah, and thanks for that, Aisha. And yeah, I mean, for us as World Business Chicago, our superpower is that we are the convener. So, as Aisha just laid out, we bring together the key players on a deal to make sure that this development happens and that it's beneficial to everyone at the table, including the corporate partner that's brought to the table. Because, as Chris was saying, ultimately this work is beneficial to all of the businesses that we support. This is helping their bottom line. And so no, managing director or CEO or C-suite person would be opposed to that, growing their business. So I think, I think it just needs to happen more often. So with that being said, again, we're more than willing to provide like case studies to businesses, provide playbooks for those that are like, hey, I'm kind of thinking about this, but I'm not really sure where to start. But yeah, we're the convener here and we can help, people make that first step, working alongside everybody on this call.
Okay, well, we're out of time. So thank you, everyone. Sarah is here and I will turn it over to her.
First and foremost, I want to thank all of our amazing panelists. And Talene, I am grateful for the knowledge that you've shared, not only with me today, but I've been fortunate enough to engage with everyone on this call and previous conversations and continue to learn from you, both about ways that we can be working collectively as a corporate community, but also about how we can listen better and differently, frankly, than I think the corporate community has always been showing up. So I'm appreciative of your time today. As Eric mentioned at the beginning of the session, my name is Sarah Glavin. I'm the head of the community affairs team for Amazon in Chicago. And also want to share Eric and the Executives Club appreciation for everyone's time. So I'll lead everyone in a virtual round of applause. I really have enjoyed understanding, I think, and having you share with the broader corporate community the way your teams are each reshaping, redefining the landscape of the city. And there were so many pieces that I really want to make sure we all take with us today that we can highlight and share with our teams about this work. I think we had a great discussion understanding and redefining what partnership can look like from examples that each of you shared, but specifically, I think Chris and Sharif really thinking about our neighborhoods as a broader part of our network and our employee base. I think this helps to serve as a reminder that all of us can be doing more than writing a check, that we're really impacting the lives of not only people across the city, but our own employees with this kind of engagement. And as Aisha said, being committed to whatever table we find ourselves at, and that community is really not a spectator sport. So I really appreciated that sentiment, and I hope that'll stay with us. Also, that I think we're creating some lasting change, especially as we think about how we support small and entrepreneurial businesses, how we learn about housing developments like Chris shared, healthcare and wellness initiatives like Sharif shared with us today, but also that these things don't only take funding, they take technology, they take thought leadership, they take talent. So all of our teams have broader things that they can contribute to that picture. And finally, I wanted to also share, I think this was an important comment that was reemphasized by a question. The work doesn't end after 2 years of activism. I think we can't get comfortable, and that if we really want to see systemic changes to continue to grow across the city, we need to keep having conversations like this one today. And as Sharif said, keep lifting that veil, keep hearing about the needs of the people living in our communities and really working to make that change across the city in an active way. So thanks once again for everyone's time and for all of this conversation. And we hope it's just a starting place for this forum and really looking to the leadership across our neighborhoods and holding it up for all of the business community to learn from. I just want to share a couple of quick upcoming events for the Executives Club. There is a sustenance and sustainability program, how food and beverage leaders view the ESG challenge on March 30th. A life sciences lens, real estate for the future event taking place on April 6th. And both of these programs you can register for at the www.executivesclub.org address. And with that, just want to again thank the team and wish everyone well today and continued action and productive work across our city.